A mother vanishes after a piano lesson, leaving her son haunted. 15 years later, Mason uncovers a chilling trafficking ring. Will he save her? Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to catch our latest thrilling stories. Lightning tore the sky as Mason sprinted through the alley, rain stinging his face. The stolen police file a sodden weight against his ribs. Sirens wailed, their shrieks clawing through the storm, red-blue lights pulsing like a heartbeat. He'd broken into the old precinct's archive, a crumbling relic of bureaucracy, and tripped a screeching alarm that woke the night. Now, at 25, a criminology student with a scar where hope used to be, Mason was running for answers, not just his life. 15 years ago, his mother vanished after his piano lesson, her car found empty, keys dangling, purse untouched. The cops shrugged carjacking, they said, case colder than the grave. Mason never swallowed their lies. Tonight he'd found a file buried in a moldy box. 5 women, snatched like his mother, all linked to Cedar Hill Recovery Center, a shuttered rehab with a shadow over its name. His boots skidded on slick asphalt as he vaulted a rusted gate, the chain link clanging. "Stop right there," a guard roared, his flashlight's beam slicing the downpour, catching Mason's jacket. He dove behind a stack of crates, heart slamming, the file's edges digging into his skin. Inside, he'd seen a photo knot, his mother, but close enough to choke him, with Cedar Hill scrawled in faded ink. Trafficking. The word was a blade, carving open a wound he'd carried since he was 10. His mother wasn't a random loss. She was part of a machine, a dark web spun behind Cedar Hill's locked gates. A patrol car screeched around the corner, tires hissing, headlights blinding. Mason bolted, weaving through a jungle of fire escapes and overflowing dumpsters, his breath a ragged fire. The file detailed a pattern. Women taken after routine pickup school runs, grocery trips, no witnesses, no bodies. Cedar Hill wasn't a rehab. It was a front, and Mason would rip it open. He stumbled into a derelict lot, the city's skyline a jagged scar against the storm. Safe, for now. He yanked the file free, hands trembling, pages sticking in the wet. Under a flickering street lamp he read, Dr. Elias Kane, Cedar Hill's director, tied to experimental therapy. A memory sparked his mother's friend, another missing woman, whispering Kane's name with fear. Headlights flared, not police, an unmarked van, blacked out windows, engine snarling. Mason's blood froze. Someone else was hunting him. He dove into a storm drain, the file slipping, a page fluttering free. "No," he hissed, lunging to snatch a photo of his mother, smiling, younger, stapled to a report labeled, Subject 17, terminated. Terminated? His stomach churned. She'd been alive, maybe still was. Footsteps crunched above. A figure loomed, not the Garda man in a long coat, face shadowed, a knife's glint in his hand. "You're digging too deep, kid," he rasped, voice like gravel. Mason scrambled, grabbing the page as the man laughed, then vanished into the rain. Mason crawled through the drain, emerging in a flooded street, soaked, wired, alive. He dialed Carl, the retired detective who'd worked his mother's case, the only cop who gave a damn. "Carl, it's Mason. Cedar Hill's dirty. I've got proof. Diner now." The line crackled. "Kid, you're stirring a hornet's nest. Watch your six." Mason hung up, the photo of his mother burning in his mind. The van's growl echoed, circling back. He ran, the diner's neon a lifeline in the chaos. Someone knew he'd cracked their secret. Good. He'd waited 15 years to fight. The alley narrowed, walls closing in, and the van's lights hit him again, closer, relentless. Mason ducked into a doorway, pulse hammering, and checked the file one last time. A scribbled note. Kane's funding offshore accounts. This wasn't just trafficking, it was a network, and his mother was its ghost. The van slowed, a door sliding open. Mason gripped the file, ready to run again, but a second figure stepped from the shadows ahead, not the knife man, but someone new, holding a phone, recording him. "You're on the list now," they whispered, then melted away. Mason's jaw clenched. The diner was 2 blocks off. He'd make it, or die trying. For her. Mason slid into the diner's cracked vinyl booth, the neon buzz outside casting jagged shadows across his face. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the city into a smear of light and menace. The stolen file lay hidden under his jacket, its secrets heavy as a gun. Carl, the retired detective, sat across from him, his weathered face etched with suspicion, a half-burned cigarette dangling from his lips. At 60, Carl looked like he'd fought the devil and lost, but his eyes sharp, unyielding told Mason he was still in the game. "You look like hell, kid," Carl rasped, sliding a coffee mug across the table. Mason ignored it, his fingers twitching toward the file. "I found something. Cedar Hill's not just a rehab. It's a front trafficking, maybe worse." Carl's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Mason pulled out the file, pages crinkled and damp, and spread them on the table. Photos of 5 women, including his mother, stared up, their eyes hollowed by fear. A scribbled note mentioned Dr. Elias Kane and offshore accounts. Carl leaned in, scanning the pages, his cigarette forgotten. "Kane," he muttered. "That bastard's name came up in '09. Slippery as oil. Cops couldn't pin him." Mason's pulse quickened. "He's the key. I need to know who he's working with." Carl snorted, but there was no humor in it. "You're poking a dragon, kid. Kane had friends cops, judges, money men. You don't just walk into his world." Mason slammed a fist on the table, rattling the mugs. "I'm not walking. I'm kicking the door down." The diner's hum faltered. A waitress glanced over, then away. Carl stubbed out his cigarette. "All right. There's a guy, Ronnie Voss, low-life informant. Worked maintenance at Cedar Hill before it shuttered. He's still in town, holed up in a scrapyard. Might know something." Mason nodded, memorizing the name. The door jangled, and 2 men in cheap suits entered, their eyes sweeping the room. Not cops too slick, too deliberate. Mason's gut twisted. "Carl, we've got company." The detective didn't turn. "Keep your head down. Follow my lead." The men lingered at the counter, one tapping a phone, the other scanning the booths. Mason shoved the file back under his jacket, his heart pounding. Carl slid a napkin across, scribbled an address. "Voss's yard. Go. I'll handle this." Mason hesitated, but Carl's glare was iron. "Move, kid. Now." He slipped out the back, the alley swallowing him in cold, wet dark. The scrapyard was across town, a maze of rust and wreckage. Mason ran, the city's pulse matching his own, every shadow a threat. He reached the yard by dawn, its gates chained, a faint glow leaking from a trailer within. Voss was his only lead, and he wasn't leaving empty-handed. He scaled the fence, landing hard in mud, the air thick with oil and decay. A dog barked, sharp and close. Mason froze, crouching behind a stack of tires. The trailer door creaked open, and a wiry man, Voss, he hoped, stepped out, shotgun in hand. "Who's there?" Voss growled, his voice raw from years of smoke and cheap whiskey. Mason raised his hands, stepping into the light. "I'm not here to hurt you. I need to talk about Cedar Hill." Voss's eyes narrowed, the shotgun steady. "You a cop?" Mason shook his head. "My mother disappeared. She was one of Kane's—" The name hit Voss like a slap. His grip faltered. "Get inside. Quick." The trailer was a mess: beer cans, yellowed papers, a flickering television. Voss locked the door, his hands shaking. "Kane's people are still out there. They watch me. You shouldn't have come." Mason leaned forward. "Tell me what you know." Voss hesitated, then spilled. Cedar Hill wasn't just a rehab. It ran treatments that broke people, women mostly, shipped off to God knows where. Kane oversaw it, but someone bigger pulled the strings. Voss saw trucks leaving at night, heard screams. He quit when it got too heavy, but they never let him go. A crash outside cut him off, glass shattered, and the trailer's lights died. "They're here," Voss whispered, grabbing his gun. Mason's blood ran cold. Headlights pierced the windows, an engine roaring. He dove for cover as the door exploded inward. 2 figures in masks storming in, silenced pistols raised. Voss fired, the shotgun's blast deafening, but a bullet caught his shoulder, and he crumpled. Mason lunged, tackling one attacker, their guns skidding across the floor. Fists flew, bone crunching bone. He slammed the man's head against the wall, knocking him out, but the second was on him, a knife flashing. Mason twisted, the blade grazing his arm, and kicked the man's knee, dropping him. He grabbed Voss's shotgun, panting, blood dripping. "Who sent you?" he snarled. The conscious attacker spat. "You're dead already." Mason knocked him out with the gun's stock. Voss groaned, clutching his wound. Go. They'll send more. Mason grabbed a blood-stained ledger. Voss had mentioned names, dates, shipments. It was proof. He ran, the yard erupting in flames behind him as a Molotov cocktail hit the trailer. The city swallowed him again, but he wasn't alone. A black van trailed, its engine a low growl. Mason clutched the ledger, his mother's face in his mind. Kane's network was closing in, but he'd fight until his last breath. Mason slid into the diner's cracked vinyl booth, the neon buzz outside casting jagged shadows across his face. Rain streaked the windows, blurring the city into a smear of light and menace. The stolen file lay hidden under his jacket, its secrets heavy as a gun. Carl, the retired detective, sat across from him, his weathered face etched with suspicion, a half-burned cigarette dangling from his lips. At 60, Carl looked like he'd fought the devil and lost, but his eyes sharp, unyielding told Mason he was still in the game. "You look like hell, kid," Carl rasped, sliding a coffee mug across the table. Mason ignored it, his fingers twitching toward the file. "I found something. Cedar Hill's not just a rehab. It's a front trafficking, maybe worse." Carl's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt. Mason pulled out the file, pages crinkled and damp, and spread them on the table. Photos of 5 women, including his mother, stared up, their eyes hollowed by fear. A scribbled note mentioned Dr. Elias Kane and offshore accounts. Carl leaned in, scanning the pages, his cigarette forgotten. "Kane," he muttered. "That bastard's name came up in '09. Slippery as oil. Cops couldn't pin him." Mason's pulse quickened. "He's the key. I need to know who he's working with." Carl snorted, but there was no humor in it. "You're poking a dragon, kid. Kane had friends cops, judges, money men. You don't just walk into his world." Mason slammed a fist on the table, rattling the mugs. "I'm not walking. I'm kicking the door down." The diner's hum faltered. A waitress glanced over, then away. Carl stubbed out his cigarette. "All right. There's a guy, Ronnie Voss, low-life informant. Worked maintenance at Cedar Hill before it shuttered. He's still in town, holed up in a scrapyard. Might know something." Mason nodded, memorizing the name. The door jangled, and 2 men in cheap suits entered, their eyes sweeping the room. Not cops too slick, too deliberate. Mason's gut twisted. "Carl, we've got company." The detective didn't turn. "Keep your head down, follow my lead." The men lingered at the counter, one tapping a phone, the other scanning the booths. Mason shoved the file back under his jacket, his heart pounding. Carl slid a napkin across, scribbled an address. "Voss's yard. Go. I'll handle this." Mason hesitated, but Carl's glare was iron. "Move, kid. Now." He slipped out the back, the alley swallowing him in cold, wet dark. The scrapyard was across town, a maze of rust and wreckage. Mason ran, the city's pulse matching his own, every shadow a threat. He reached the yard by dawn, its gates chained, a faint glow leaking from a trailer within. Voss was his only lead, and he wasn't leaving empty-handed. He scaled the fence, landing hard in mud, the air thick with oil and decay. A dog barked, sharp and close. Mason froze, crouching behind a stack of tires. The trailer door creaked open, and a wiry man Voss, he hoped, stepped out, shotgun in hand. "Who's there?" Voss growled, his voice raw from years of smoke and cheap whiskey. Mason raised his hands, stepping into the light. "I'm not here to hurt you. I need to talk about Cedar Hill." Voss's eyes narrowed, the shotgun steady. "You a cop?" Mason shook his head. "My mother disappeared. She was one of Kane's." The name hit Voss like a slap. His grip faltered. "Get inside. Quick." The trailer was a mess, beer cans, yellowed papers, a flickering television. Voss locked the door, his hands shaking. "Kane's people are still out there. They watch me." "You shouldn't have come." Mason leaned forward. "Tell me what you know." Voss hesitated, then spilled. Cedar Hill wasn't just a rehab, it ran treatments that broke people. Women mostly, shipped off to God knows where. Kane oversaw it, but someone bigger pulled the strings. Voss saw trucks leaving at night, heard screams. He quit when it got too heavy, but they never let him go. A crash outside cut him off. Glass shattered, and the trailer's lights died. "They're here," Voss whispered, grabbing his gun. Mason's blood ran cold. Headlights pierced the windows, an engine roaring. He dove for cover as the door exploded inward. 2 figures in masks storming in, silenced pistols raised. Voss fired, the shotgun's blast deafening, but a bullet caught his shoulder, and he crumpled. Mason lunged, tackling one attacker, their gun skidding across the floor. Fists flew, bone crunching bone. He slammed the man's head against the wall, knocking him out, but the second was on him, a knife flashing. Mason twisted, the blade grazing his arm, and kicked the man's knee, dropping him. He grabbed Voss's shotgun, panting, blood dripping. "Who sent you?" he snarled. The conscious attacker spat. "You're dead already." Mason knocked him out with the gun's stock. Voss groaned, clutching his wound. "Go, they'll send more." Mason grabbed a blood-stained ledger. Voss had mentioned names, dates, shipments. It was proof. He ran, the yard erupting in flames behind him as a Molotov cocktail hit the trailer. The city swallowed him again, but he wasn't alone. A black van trailed, its engine a low growl. Mason clutched the ledger, his mother's face in his mind. Kane's network was closing in, but he'd fight until his last breath. Mason's ears still rang from the warehouse explosion, his clothes singed and reeking of smoke as he stumbled through the dock's maze of shipping containers. The photos of his mother and the other women, crumpled but intact, weighed heavy in his backpack, each image a scream for justice. The city's pulse thrummed with danger. Kane's network was tightening its grip, their trap at the warehouse proof they'd do anything to bury the truth. Mason's arm bled through his sleeve, the knife wound from Voss's trailer festering, but pain was just fuel now. He needed Carl, needed a plan, but his phone was dead, fried in the blast. The ledger and photos were all he had left, and they painted a horror show. Cedar Hill wasn't just trafficking women, it was erasing them, stripping their minds before shipping them to unknown hells. His mother's face, gaunt and vacant in that photo, haunted him. Subject 17, alive maybe, but broken. Mason ducked into a derelict boatyard, the stink of rust and seaweed thick in the air. He crouched behind a rotting hull, checking the photos under a sliver of moonlight. One image showed a woman he recognized, not his mother, but Sarah Tate, a name from the ledger. Carl had mentioned her once, a survivor who'd escaped Cedar Hill before it shut down. If she was still alive, she could blow this wide open. Mason memorized her last known address from the file, a rundown motel across town. It was a long shot, but he had nothing else. He moved fast, sticking to shadows, the city's neon haze a constant threat. Every car that passed felt like the black van, its engine still echoing in his mind. By midnight, he reached the motel, a flickering sign buzzing over a row of peeling doors. Room 17, Sarah's last known spot. He knocked, soft but urgent. No answer. He jimmied the lock, a trick from his teenage years, and slipped inside. The room was a wreck, stained carpet, a sagging bed, and a single photo taped to the mirror. Sarah, younger, smiling with a kid. Mason's gut twisted. She'd had a life before Kane. A noise outside snapped him, alert, a car door slamming. He peered through the blinds. Two men, one with a scar across his cheek, stood by a sedan, scanning the motel. Kane's cleaners. Mason grabbed the photo and crept to the bathroom, hoping for a back exit. The window was nailed shut. Trapped. The door burst open, boots thudding. "Check the bathroom," Scarface growled. Mason gripped his pocket knife, heart hammering, and wedged himself behind the shower curtain. The second man entered, pistol raised, his shadow looming. Mason held his breath, the knife's blade cold against his palm. The man paused, inches away, then turned back. "Clear," Mason exhaled, but relief died fast. Scarface's voice barked, "She's not here. Burn it." Mason's blood froze. He heard liquid splashing, the sharp stink of gasoline. They weren't just hunting Sarah, they were erasing her. He had seconds. He pried the window's nails loose, hands shaking, and crawled out as flames roared behind him. The motel lit up like a pyre, black smoke choking the sky. Mason ran, the photo of Sarah clutched tight, but the men spotted him. "There!" Scarface shouted, firing. A bullet grazed Mason's shoulder, hot pain searing through him. He dove behind a dumpster, gasping, and sprinted into an alley. The sedan's tires screeched, pursuing. Mason zigzagged through back streets, his vision blurring from blood loss, until he lost them in a crowded train yard. Collapsing against a rusted railcar, he checked the photo. On its back in shaky handwriting, "Find Lena. She knows." Lena. A new name, a new lead. Mason bandaged his shoulder with a torn shirt, wincing, and forced himself up. Carl had to know about this, but finding him meant risking another trap. He remembered Carl's old safe house, a dive bar in the slums where the detective used to meet snitches. It was his best shot. By dawn, Mason reached the bar, its neon sign dead, the air sour with stale beer. Carl was there, nursing a whiskey, his face grim. "Jesus, kid, you're a mess," Carl said, eyeing the blood. Mason slid into the booth, dropping the photo. Sarah Tate's dead or gone. They burned her place. Found this mentioned someone named Lena. Carl's eyes darkened. Lena Carter, old colleague of Kane's. Went off-grid when Cedar Hill closed. If she's alive, she's a ghost. Mason leaned in, voice low. Then we hunt a ghost. Kane's people are closing in. They know I'm close. Carl drained his glass. You're not close, you're in the crosshairs. Lena's last sighting was a clinic upstate. We go now, or you're dead by sundown. Mason nodded, the photo of Sarah burning in his mind. Kane's empire was crumbling, but every step forward cost blood. As they left the bar, a shadow moved across the street, a figure, watching, phone in hand. Mason's jaw clenched. The hunt was on, and he was both predator and prey. Mason's shoulder burned, the makeshift bandage soaked with blood. But he gripped the photo of Sarah Tate like a lifeline as he and Carl sped through the city's outskirts in the detective's beat-up sedan. Dawn's light did nothing to ease the dread coiling in his gut. Lena Carter, Kane's former colleague, was their next leader ghost who might hold the key to dismantling the trafficking ring. The clinic upstate, Carl said, was her last known haunt, a low-rent facility for addicts and drifters, perfect for someone hiding from Kane's reach. Mason's backpack, heavy with the ledger, photos, and stolen files, sat between his feet, each document a piece of his mother's stolen life. Subject 17. The term haunted him, her gaunt face in that warehouse photo a silent scream. Carl's knuckles whitened on the wheel, his eyes flicking to the rear view. "We're being followed," he growled, nodding at a grey CUV trailing a quarter-mile back. Mason twisted, spotting the vehicle's tinted windows. Kane's cleaners. Again. "Lose them," he said, voice steady despite the pain lancing his arm. Carl floored it, the sedan's engine groaning as they swerved onto a back road, tires kicking up gravel. The SUV matched their speed, closing fast. Mason's mind raced. He needed Lena, needed answers, but every move drew Kane's noose tighter. The road narrowed, flanked by dense pines, and Carl took a sharp turn, the car fishtailing. The SUV rammed their bumper, metal screeching. "Hold on!" Carl shouted, jerking the wheel. Mason braced, the impact jarring his wounded shoulder. He yanked out Voss's pocket knife, useless against guns but better than nothing. The SUV pulled alongside, a masked man leaning out with a pistol. Carl swerved, forcing the shooter to miss, the bullet pinging off the sedan's frame. Mason's heart pounded. This wasn't a chase. It was an execution. He grabbed the ledger, shoving it under the seat. "If I don't make it, get this to the feds," he told Carl, who cursed but nodded. The road ended at a rusted bridge, and Carl slammed the brakes, the sedan skidding to a stop. "Out now," he barked. They dove into the woods, branches clawing at Mason's face as gunfire erupted behind. The SUV's doors slammed, boots crunching. Mason and Carl split up, a silent agreement to divide their hunters. Mason ran, the photo of Sarah in his pocket, Lena's name a beacon. He stumbled into a clearing, a derelict cabin ahead, its windows dark. He broke inside, barricading the door with a rotted chair. The cabin stank of mildew, but a dusty laptop sat on a table, its screen cracked but glowing. Mason powered it on, hands shaking, and found a single file. A video, time-stamped 2012. He clicked play. His mother's face filled the screen, strapped to a gurney, eyes vacant. Kane's voice droning off-camera about compliance protocols. Mason's stomach churned. She was alive then, drugged, broken, but alive. The video cut to another woman, Lena Carter, younger, in a white coat, arguing with Kane before storming out. Proof. Lena had turned against him. Footsteps circled the cabin. Mason ripped the laptop's drive out, stuffing it into his pack. A window shattered, a canister hissing as it rolled inside gas. His eyes burned, lungs seizing. He kicked the door open, diving out as bullets tore through the wood. Two men waited, masked, armed. Mason charged, knife flashing, catching one in the arm. The man howled, dropping his gun. Mason grabbed it, firing wildly, and the second man ducked for cover. He ran, gas clouding his vision, the hard driver burning weight. He found Carl by the river, bloodied but alive, one attacker down at his feet. "Got the drive," Mason gasped, coughing. Carl nodded, dragging him toward the sedan, miraculously still intact. They peeled out, the SUV gone for now. The clinic was an hour away, a squat building in a forgotten town. They parked a block off, approaching on foot. The receptionist, a nervous woman, confirmed Lena worked nights but hadn't shown in days. Mason showed her Sarah's photo. "Know her?" The woman paled, whispering, "She came here, asking for Lena." Then she disappeared. Mason's jaw clenched. Kane was erasing everyone. A back room held patient records, and Mason tore through them, finding Lena's alias Dr. Laura Crane. Her last entry mentioned a safe house, coordinates scrawled in the margin. As they left, the clinic's lights flickered, and a new vehicle rolled up, a black van, too familiar. Mason gripped the stolen gun, the hard drive heavy in his pack. Lena was close, but so was Kane's wrath. He'd fight through hell to reach her, his mother's face driving every step. Mason's hands trembled as he clutched the stolen hard drive, its weight heavier than the gun tucked into his waistband. The black van's headlights had vanished into the dusk, but the threat lingered, a noose tightening around him and Carl as they sped toward Lena Carter's safe house. The coordinates from the clinic's records led to a remote stretch of farmland where skeletal trees clawed at a bruised sky. Carl's sedan rattled over dirt roads, the engine coughing, its headlights barely cutting through the fog. Mason's shoulder wound throbbed, the pain a dull roar, but the video from the cabin burned brighter in his mind. His mother, strapped down, Kane's voice droning, Lena storming out. Lena knew the truth. She'd seen the horror of Cedar Hill and walked away. If she was still alive, she was their last hope to crack Kane's empire. Carl's eyes flicked to the rear view, his face carved with exhaustion. No tail yet, but they're coming. Kane doesn't let loose ends breathe. Mason nodded, checking the hard drive, its casing cracked but intact. Lena's our shot. She worked with Kane, saw what he did to my mum. We get her, we get him. The safe house emerged from the Mr. barn, its red paint peeling, windows boarded tight. Carl killed the engine, and they approached on foot, the air sharp with frost and decay. Mason's boots crunched on gravel, every sound a betrayal in the silence. The barn's door hung ajar, a padlock snapped like a bone. Inside, the air was thick with dust, hay bales stacked high, and a faint hum of electricity led to a trapdoor beneath a rusted tractor. Carl drew his revolver, nodding to Mason, who gripped the stolen pistol. They descended into a concrete bunker, lit by flickering bulbs, its walls lined with monitors and medical files. Lena had been here, turning Kane's secrets against him. A laptop glowed on a steel desk, its screen showing live feeds warehouses, clinics, docks, Kane's network, mapped out. Mason's pulse raced. This was the nerve center. He plugged in the hard drive, pulling up the video again, but new files loaded, patient logs, transfer schedules, and a name, Elias Kane, linked to an offshore account and a shell company, Nexus Global. His mother's file was there, marked Relocated 2015. She was alive, moved 4 years ago. Mason's breath caught, hope and dread colliding. Footsteps echoed above. Carl spun, gun raised. We're not alone. The trapdoor slammed shut, a bolt sliding into place. Mason yanked at it, but it wouldn't budge. A hiss filled the air gas, seeping through vents. They found us, Carl growled, coughing as the room blurred. Mason's eyes stung, but he grabbed the laptop, ripping out its drive. We're not dying here. He shot the trapdoor's lock, the blast deafening, and kicked it open, lungs burning. They stumbled into the barn, only to face 3 figures in tactical gear, rifles trained. Drop the gun, kid, one barked, his voice muffled by a mask. Mason froze, calculating. Carl fired first, clipping a man's shoulder, and chaos erupted. Mason dove behind a hay bale, Returning fire, the pistol's recoil jarring his wounded arm. Bullets tore through wood, straw flying like shrapnel. He hit one man in the leg, dropping him, but the third lunged, slamming Mason to the ground. The laptop drive skidded free, and Mason clawed for it, his attacker's fist crashing into his jaw. Carl tackled the man, freeing Mason, who grabbed the drive and ran for the door. Outside, the barn was surrounded 2 more men, plus the black van, its engine idling. Mason sprinted for the sedan, Carl behind, but a bullet grazed Carl's side, and he stumbled. "Go!" Carl roared, firing back. Mason hesitated, then dove into the car, slamming it into gear. The van pursued, ramming the sedan's rear as Mason floored it, the dirt road a blur. He swerved, dodging gunfire, the laptop drive in his pocket, his mother's files seared into his mind. Carl's fate gnawed at him, but he couldn't stop. The coordinates mentioned a final location, a derelict hospital, tied to Nexus Global. It was where they'd taken her. The van gained, a shooter leaning out. Mason jerked the wheel, sending the sedan into a ditch, but he crawled out, running into the woods. The hospital was close, a rotting monolith on a hill. He reached it by nightfall, its halls echoing with neglect, broken gurneys littering the floor. A faint light glowed in the basement. Mason descended, gun raised, and found a locked door, a keypad blinking. He tried, "Subject 17, and it clicked open. Inside, a woman sat at a desk, her back to him, Lena Carter, alive, typing furiously. "I've been waiting," she said, turning, her eyes haunted. "Kane's coming for us both." Mason gripped the drive, his mother's face in every shadow. The hospital shook, a distant explosion. Kane's cleaners were here, and time was up. Mason's heart pounded as he faced Lena Carter in the hospital's basement, her haunted eyes locking onto his, the stolen laptop drive burning in his pocket. The derelict building groaned under the weight of a distant explosion, dust raining from the ceiling. Kane's cleaners were closing in, their boots echoing like a death knell through the rotting halls above. Lena, gaunt and graying, stood from her desk, papers, scattering maps, patient logs, photos of women, including his mother. "You're Elizabeth's son," she said, voice low, urgent. "I tried to stop him, but Kane, he's a monster." Mason gripped his stolen pistol, blood crusting his wounded shoulder, the pain a distant scream. "Where is she?" he demanded, the image of his mother. Subject 17, drugged, vacant, searing his mind. Lena's gaze faltered. "She's here, upstairs, but she's not her anymore." Mason's stomach lurched. "Not her anymore?" He shoved the drive at Lena. "This has everything, your fight with Kane, the transfers. Help me get her out." Lena nodded, grabbing a flash drive of her own, stuffing it into her coat. "Follow me. We don't have long." They climbed a rusted stairwell, the air thick with mold and antiseptic ghosts. Lena whispered as they moved, her words jagged. She'd been Kane's protégé, developing therapies at Cedar Hill, until she saw the truth women broken by drugs, their minds erased, sold to the highest bidder. She'd fled, leaking files to cripple Kane, but he'd hunted her ever since. Mason's jaw clenched. Lena was a lifeline, but his mother was the mission. They reached a locked ward, its door reinforced, a keypad glowing. Lena punched in a code, and it hissed open. Inside, a dozen women sat in a sterile room, their eyes dull, faces blank. Mason scanned them, his breath catching his mother, Elizabeth, sat in the corner, staring at nothing, her once vibrant features hollowed by years of torment. "Mom," he choked, rushing to her, but she didn't flinch, her gaze sliding through him like he was a stranger. Lena grabbed his arm. "Kane's drugs, they shatter memory. She doesn't know you." Mason's knees buckled, rage and grief colliding. He knelt, taking her hand, cold and limp. "I'm Mason, your son. I'm getting you out." Her eyes flickered, a ghost of recognition, then faded. Footsteps thundered closer, Kane's men. Lena yanked Mason up. "We move now." They half-carried Elizabeth, her steps robotic, through a service corridor, its walls peeling, lights stuttering. Gunfire erupted behind, bullets chewing plaster. Mason fired back blindly, shielding his mother, Lena leading the way. They burst into a loading dock, a rusted van waiting, keys in the ignition, Lena's escape plan. Mason helped his mother inside, her silence a knife in his chest. Lena slid behind the wheel, but a figure stepped from the shadows. Doctor Elias Kane himself, tall, silver-haired, his smile cold as death. "You're persistent, Mr. Harper," he said, a silenced pistol in his hand. Mason raised his gun, but Kane was faster, firing, the bullet grazing Lena's arm. She gasped, swerving the van as Mason shot back, missing. Kane ducked behind crates, his voice taunting, "She's mine, boy. They all are." Mason's blood boiled. He leapt from the van, tackling Kane, the gun skidding free. They grappled, fists slamming bone, Kane's strength surprising for his age. Mason's wounded shoulder screamed, but he drove his knee into Kane's gut, pinning him. "Where's the rest of your network?" he snarled. Kane laughed, blood on his teeth. "You'll never stop Nexus. It's bigger than me," Lena shouted. "Mason, we have to go." A new explosion rocked the hospital, flames licking the dock. Kane's men were torching the evidence. Mason knocked Kane out with a crate, dragging him to the van. They sped off, the hospital collapsing in their rear view. Elizabeth silent, Lena bleeding but driving. Mason cuffed Kane with zip ties, his mother's blank stare tearing him apart. He whispered to her, "I'll bring you back, I swear." Lena coughed, her voice weak. "There's a safe house, 2 hours north. I have contacts, feds, uncorrupted. They'll take Kane, the drives, everything." Mason nodded, but his eyes stayed on his mother. A memory surfaced, her singing at his piano recitals, her laugh. He leaned close, humming that old tune, and her fingers twitched, a faint hum echoing his. Tears stung his eyes. She was in there, somewhere. The van hit a pothole, and Kane stirred, smirking. "She'll never be yours again," he spat. Mason's fist tightened, but he held back. Kane would face justice, not his rage. Headlights flared behind a black SUV, Kane's last cleaners. Mason readied his gun, the safe house their final stand. His mother's hand brushed his, a fleeting warmth. For her, he'd fight until the end. Mason's grip on the stolen pistol tightened as the black SUV's headlights bore down on the van, its engine a feral growl cutting through the night. Lena floored the gas, the vehicle lurching over frost-cracked roads, her bloodied arm trembling but steady on the wheel. In the back, Elizabeth sat silent, her vacant eyes a wound Mason couldn't heal not yet. Kane, zip-tied and slumped against the van's wall, smirked despite his bruised face, his taunt echoing, "You'll never stop Nexus." Mason ignored him, his focus split between the pursuing SUV and his mother's faint hum, a fragile thread of the woman she'd been. The safe house was 30 miles off, a remote cabin where Lena's FBI contacts waited, ready to take Kane, the drives, and the truth to burn Nexus Global to the ground. But the SUV was gaining, its tires screaming, a shooter leaning out with a rifle. Mason cracked the van's rear door, firing, the recoil jarring his wounded shoulder. Bullets sparked off the SUV's hood, forcing it to swerve, but it didn't stop. Lena shouted, "Hold on," and veered onto a dirt path, branches scraping the van like claws. The SUV followed, relentless, its lights blinding. Mason's clip ran dry, and he scrambled for Carl's revolver, tucked in his pack. His mother's hand brushed his, a ghost of warmth, and he whispered, "I'm here, Mom. Stay with me." Her fingers curled, just slightly, and his heart surged. She was fighting, somewhere deep inside. The path dead-ended at a frozen river, the safe house a faint glow across the ice. Lena slammed the brakes, the van fishtailing. "We run," she rasped, grabbing her flash drive. Mason helped Elizabeth out, her steps unsteady, and dragged Kane, the doctor's smug grin faltering as the SUV's doors slammed open. 3 men emerged, rifles raised, their silhouettes sharp against the snow. Mason shoved his mother behind a tree, Lena covering her, and fired Carl's revolver, dropping one man with a chest shot. The others scattered, returning fire, bark exploding around them. Kane twisted, trying to break free, but Mason slammed him to the ground. "Move, and you're dead," he snarled. Lena led Elizabeth toward the river, ice cracking under their weight. Mason followed, dragging Kane, bullets whistling past. The safe house's door burst a pent of figures, not Kane's men, but feds, their vests marked FBI. "Carter! Harper!" one shouted, laying cover fire. Mason's chest loosened, but only for a second. The ice groaned. a fissure splitting beneath his mother. "Mom!" he yelled, diving for her. Lena pulled her back, the ice holding, but a bullet caught Lena's leg, and she collapsed, clutching the drive. Mason fired back, his last round hitting a shooter in the shoulder. The final man charged, a knife flashing, but the feds cut him down, his body crumpling in the snow. Mason reached Lena, tearing his sleeve to bind her wound, her drive safe in her hand. The feds secured Kane, cuffing him properly, his empire crumbling with every step toward the safe house. Inside, a medic tended Lena and Elizabeth, while an agent took the drives, their data a death sentence for Nexus. Mason sat by his mother, her face still blank, but her hum grew stronger, matching the tune he'd sung. He told her stories, piano lessons, her laughter, their old life. Days later, in a safe facility, the feds raided Nexus's hubs, freeing dozens of women, their faces hauntingly familiar from the ledger. Kane faced trial, his smirk gone, his network exposed. Mason visited his mother daily, her memory fragmented but stirring small smiles. A whispered, "Mason," one morning, her hand squeezing his. Therapists warned recovery would be slow, but every word she spoke was a victory. Lena, healing, testified against Kane, her guilt easing as justice rolled out. Carl, Mason learned, had survived, saved by dock workers after their split, and sent a gruff note. "Finish it, kid." Mason did. He enrolled in law enforcement training, vowing to hunt traffickers, his mother's strength his guide. Months later, Elizabeth walked with him in a park, her laugh faint but real, their bond rebuilding. The scars remained, but so did they, unbroken, alive. Mason unravels a trafficking ring, saving his mother and others. Justice prevails, and they heal together. Thanks for listening. Like, share, and subscribe to catch our latest stories. Don't miss out, hit the bell for notifications.